Miigwech, thank you for that wonderful prayer and blessing, Renee. Now we're going to turn to do our introductions of our ECHO team and also of our speaker. So I'm Dr. Laurel Myra. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health and an enrolled member in the Red Lake Nation. Thank you, Renee, for already introducing yourself. So I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Michelle Corcoran. I am the nurse manager of the MAT program at the Native American Community Clinic. Thanks for joining us.
Elizabeth, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Hi, I'm Beth Ryan, and I'm the Project ECHO coordinator. So if you have any questions about ECHO or need some connections or whatever, you can email me at elizabeth.ryan@hcmed.org.
Wonderful. And Dr. Lewis, will you introduce yourself?
Tiona God, my name is Melissa Lewis. I am a citizen of Cherokee Nation, and I'm here in Tahlequah, the capital right now. But I do work at University of Missouri in the School of Medicine. I'm an assistant professor in the Family and Community Medicine Department, and happy to be here today.
Great, welcome. And then for those of you who've Zoomed in, please introduce yourselves in the chat. If you could, put your name and your title and organization and email, and then we'll be able to send you information about CEUs and add you to future invites as well.
All right, should I go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes, thank you. All right.
There we go.
Thank you. So we did our prayer and land acknowledgement. Thank you, Renee. Introductions, and now our agenda. I'm going to go over some Zoom guidelines, and then Michelle is going to do some announcements. Dr. Lewis will share about the Indigenous Health Toolkit, part 2, so going a little bit more in depth on the toolkit. And then Michelle is going to present a case presentation here after that, and then we'll close out. All right. Again, if you could introduce yourself in the chat, and then if you would like to update your name on the screen, go ahead and click right and rename your screen. And then if you could turn on your camera, we do like to see everybody. It just helps to put a name with a face and to get to know each other over time. And if you could mute yourself when you're not speaking, that would be very helpful just for some of that background noise. And then if you could raise your hand or put questions in the chat, we'll make sure to respond to those. And again, please know health information when you're presenting or asking questions. Thank you.
All right, so I'll do some announcements here. Let's see. As always, I'll remind you the first and third Wednesday of the month, we meet from noon to 1, and that's Central Standard Time. Upcoming sessions are going to be pretty interesting. So in March, we've got Intercultural Development Inventory. Lisa Shefke, who is a health equity specialist, will be joining us to talk about that. And then on the 17th is going to be Plant Medicines and the Treatment of OUD or opioid use disorder with Linda Black Elk, sorry. So that'll be pretty cool too. Join us if you can. We do record these, so if you ever really want to participate in one and don't get an opportunity, we may be able to get a recording to you in a different way. You don't get CEU for that, but you would at least get to see the info. NAC is going to be doing hosting an event. So NAC and 3 Ojibwe storytellers. So what do we got? February 25th from 6:30 to 8. Of course, everything's on Zoom. I'm going to leave this up for just a moment if people want to kind of jot down this Eventbrite link here. By going to this link, you can register and get tickets, and certainly reach out to any of us at NAC or on the ECHO team if you want more information about it. Case presentations. So again, like Dr. Myra mentioned, you know, we want to get to know you all and really kind of create this sense of community. Case presentations are one of those ways that we can kind of create that. So you're welcome and encouraged to send in clinical questions, you know, success stories or really difficult things, and we can kind of chat about them during a session. It doesn't necessarily have to be relevant to the topic of that session. And if you have, you know, something you wanted to chat about, but maybe didn't want to do a case presentation, you can reach out to us for kind of some one-on-one mentorship or guidance if you have questions about anything. Those can be submitted through the healthcare.org website. Their ECHO page does have a link for the Midwest Tribal ECHO. CME Credit, as long as you provide us with your information, including your email address, we're going to send you an email with a survey. Completing that survey and submitting it allows you to then be eligible for CME or CEU credit for the sessions. And then I'm going to stop sharing and we will let Dr. Lewis share.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure that looks okay before we get started here. I'll check in chat, but does everything, y'all can see the screen okay?
Looks good. Looks good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Laurel and the Midwest ECHO team for inviting me and to invite me back. It's very gracious of you all. And I wanted to say thank you to Renee for that really beautiful opening prayer and kind of starting with a moment of gratitude and kind of focusing on what we're here for, healing one another and helping out one another. So thank you, Renee, for starting us out like that. And it's good to see you all again. Some of you I haven't met before. Some of you I feel like I met because I was visited with you about a month ago. So today I'll talk about a little bit more about this project called the Indigenous Health Toolkit. And I'll try to talk about it in a way that makes sense if you weren't able to make it last time. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll certainly leave time at the end as well. So let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so for a little bit of a recap, sort of on the literature review side, we know that bias exists towards Indigenous people in medical settings. You know, I reviewed a little bit about what those effects are for Indigenous people in these medical settings, and they range anywhere from, you know, emotional and psychological to really negative impacts of the care that they're given and treatment and health outcomes as well. We talked a little bit about what effective healthcare looks like for Indigenous patients, as far as what the literature says, and what studies have found so far that it's really important to deliver care in a holistic way. So biopsychosocial, spiritual domains, for example. And also, it's important to incorporate traditional Indigenous medicine. So people are maybe now incorporating mental health care into primary care, but traditional Indigenous medicine beliefs, values are important to add to the integrated care plan for Indigenous patients. So we know that successful interventions that kind of reduce or eliminate bias towards Indigenous patients have a couple of core components that we talked about last time. And finally, our response to try to reduce bias in healthcare settings is this Indigenous Health Toolkit project. I'll just recap also on the next screen a little bit of the baseline data that we found. Last time I talked about how we created this toolkit and how we tailored it to each region. So an overview of our baseline results at a clinic in the Midwest, upper Midwest. We did surveys and some focus groups for patients and providers. And we asked the patients, what is it that you want your providers to know about you as a Native person, as a patient? And then we asked the providers, what is it that you want to learn about your patient population who are Native people? And we found that they really agreed on most of the content, both that they wanted their providers to know and the providers wanted to know about how to treat their patients more effectively. So that was good. That was great news. Really on the measurement side, we used standardized measures, and we found that when you ask people about their bias, if you ask people, racism, for instance, is a very it's a very emotional word, and people have strong responses. So when we ask about people's bias, especially in a survey setting, it wasn't very effective. There's a lot of social desirability that goes into how we respond to survey questions. But when we looked more into open-ended questions, and we had open-ended questions with providers in particular, and when we had focus groups with the patients, those were more effective opportunities to understand what bias looks like for people serving Native patient in that population, and for Native people to be able to describe the kind of experiences that they have in healthcare settings, and what bias looks like, and what some of their experiences have been. So that's just a note on how to try to measure it, or try to find out what it looks like at your particular site or clinic. We also learned that bias in our study and in the literature is pretty prevalent in the healthcare experiences of most Indigenous patients. The Native patients expressed a really strong interest in being an active part of their healthcare service, and wanting to indigenize the services that they were receiving, so that it made more sense for them, their family, and their communities. So that's a little bit about the results that we covered last time. We got a small grant through kind of like an NIH, a National Institute of Health subsidiary, through Washington University in St. Louis, to create a toolkit. And here are all of the players on the team. You might recognize a few of them. We have 2 Native physicians, 2 Native licensed behavioral health specialists, a medical student, a specialist in a Native curriculum, education curriculum, and a specialist in curriculum for healthcare providers. So we spent a year and we developed this toolkit. And in this toolkit, we decided on 7 modules. And I'm going to take you through each module and just give you a little bit of an example of what that module is about and what might be in it. So the actual toolkit, it has something like this on each side, an overview of each module, and kind of like a checklist. And in that checklist, we have the purpose of the module, of that particular module. In this case, it's social justice, the background, key concepts, a couple of exercises, and application. So it's usually a 1 or a 1 to 2 pager. And then we have resources, and that's where it gets kind of lengthy. That could be up to 30 pages. And that's really the how-to guide. So in there we have for information for the instructors. So important information that instructors should know that are delivering the content. How to tailor by each location. So take the content that we have, tailor it to that particular population as far as the kind of providers, the level of providers that are there, the type of population, et cetera, et cetera. And then some content, like what should be, and maybe if it's a PowerPoint content example, sometimes we have our own PowerPoints that we provide as examples. We also have processing strategies because this content can be very emotional for people. And then finally, metrics. So we really encourage anyone who adopts this toolkit to really measure the providers and patients, if applicable, pre and post, to see if this toolkit is effective and to see how we can improve. Some things I didn't mention in this module outline are some broader parts of the toolkit. So we require that you do tailor the toolkit before you adapt it, which usually means checking in on your patient population, usually something like surveys or focus groups. And we also kind of ask for a commitment from the administration of whatever organization that they will make changes to accommodate the needs of Indigenous patients. Because we know just teaching providers is not enough to produce change. Okay, so now you get a little bit of an idea about what the toolkit is, hopefully. And I'll just go through each module and just kind of give you an example. I'll share with you the purpose of each module and then just share with you a little bit of an exercise. I want to say that when we were tailoring this toolkit, and we're still in the process, we're going to launch this at 3 sites this spring, and each site has a community or an elders advisory board associated with it. And the first advisory board that we met with were really patient with us and did a really great job of pushing us to indigenize, just indigenize every bit that we could. So I'll show you kind of an example of a different exercise that maybe has been created within an Indigenous community that we work to incorporate. So for instance, there is not a lot of work about what Indigenous social justice looks like. Excuse me. But we were really pushed to add an Indigenous social justice perspective to this model and not simply what social justice is. So this purpose of the module, this particular module, is to introduce this framework, a social justice framework, and explore how social dynamics such as race, ethnicity, and indigeneity impact healthcare access, delivery, quality, and equity. I did try to do all the correct settings for audio, so I'd like to share this with you, but if anyone is having any audio problems, I just want to share with you a couple of minutes of this video. But yeah, let me know in chat if you can't hear it. This is Mr. Richard Franklin, and he is from Australia. He's Aboriginal, and he's created this exercise called the cultural load experience. And we have worked with him to increase the instructions of how to deliver it. But I think this is just a really nice visual to demonstrate for people Indigenous experiences. So let me play, and I've got to fast forward a little bit. So give me just a couple seconds to get there. And please let me know if you're having any audio issues.
Grunt will do. I know it's early in the morning for you. Yeah, okay. So now we're going to do, Hermione, you there? Okay, could you change Beryl into a 19-year-old Aboriginal girl? There you go. Well done, you're very good at this, aren't you? So now you're an Aboriginal girl. Let's see what you carry. So, you're Eastern tribe. So they've taken away your language. So do you want to know your language?
I think so.
Okay, you've got your language. Your father's dead, because 52, 57 is the life expectancy, so you carry that. You look after a lot of siblings?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, geez, how are you going there?
Really good.
Yeah. Now, in Victoria, 97% of Aboriginal people face discrimination at least 8 times a year, and 70% worried about whole family copping it. So A lot of discrimination. You get followed in shops.
Yep.
Oops.
Oop, oh,
Oh, there you go, you're losing it. You need a cousin, you need a cousin. Excuse me, what's your name? Oh, you can, yeah, what's your name up there, brother? You in the green shirt? Come up here, Josh. So, Josh, you've been in jail, you've been writing, because most blackfellas, how many Aboriginal people here? Just hold your hand up. Okay, who here's got family in jail? Just hold your hand up. All of us. That's the way it is. So, Josh, please welcome Josh if you would. So you've been in jail. Just stand there, Josh. Don't touch them yet. So you've been in jail. So you got out. So you've got agoraphobia because you were taken away at the age of 5. You've been in institutions your whole life. You never go outside. All right. So you're living in that flat there, and you're here with Cuzzo. You're also suffering from a thing called lateral violence, where there's a conflict between your family and the local organisation. Sometimes it erupts in violence. Yeah? So in going out, what's the percentage, what's the chance, any Aboriginal person in the room, what's the chance of Beryl getting into a physical altercation? Okay, everyone agree with that? Chance of violence. Okay, how much money are you handling out of your wage weekly to family? Anyone? Any Aboriginal person? Okay, there we go.
Okay, I'll stop there just because I wanted to just kind of share with you all just a sense of that activity. What's really nice about this is Mr. Franklin is able to take statistics from that community and demonstrate it visually, which I think is important for non-Native people to get an understanding of how those experiences really play out in people's lives. So I'll move on to the next one. So this next section is cultural humility. So the purpose of this module is to demonstrate that central to the dynamics of social interaction in the United States is a learned system of power that gives unearned privileges to members of some groups, while at the same time oppressing members of other groups. Learning and using cultural empathy is an important technique to reduce bias. So here is a really nice exercise from some good friends over at the John A. Burns School of Medicine at University of Hawaii School of Medicine. So this is called Who Am I? And this is an exercise they do with their first year medical students. And it says here in this exercise, my name is, and it says it in Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian, my mountain is, my river is, my rain is, my wind is, and I am from. So they use a Native Hawaiian principle to demonstrate who they are and who they're related to and who are their natural relatives as well. So that does a couple of things. It demonstrates what an Indigenous identity looks like to non-Indigenous people, and it gives non-Native people a chance to try to introduce themselves in that way too, and to learn a little bit about the language. So that's a neat exercise that we've worked with them to put into our toolkit as well. Third is Indigenous History module. So the purpose of this section is to recognize that historical policies aimed at the genocide and assimilation of Indigenous people continue today in different forms, and they negatively affect Indigenous people's physical and emotional health. The Indigenous response to these policies has varied over time, but Indigenous people have often shown resistance and resilience. So the exercise we used here is from Robbins et al., and it's called the soul wound activity. Some people also call it the 3 cards, the 3 cards exercise. And this one, as you can see, is a pretty high emotional intensity. And what this exercise is it asks everyone in the room to put 3 things that are either what they call things they most love, 3 blessings in their life, 3 things that are most important to them. Many people usually put family, religion, and culture. And the facilitator goes through and one by one takes a card away. And then when they take a card away, they say, this is akin to the boarding school era when your daughter or your son was taken from you. And this is a very emotional response that people have, and it gives, again, non-Native people a real idea of what it would be like if today someone from your family was taken and put into the justice system, or that you weren't able to practice your religion. So that's an example of this exercise that was created to teach people about the American Indian experience. So the fourth one, after people learn a little bit about the history of Native people in their region, they learn about the health effects of colonization. So the purpose of this section is to link historical policies and traumatic events to the health disparities that we see today. This section will increase providers' ability to identify the influence of historical trauma, genocidal policies, and equitable treatment and health, allowing them to better promote opportunities for healing. So this is Chief Seattle Club. This is through the Seattle Indian Health Board. And the residents that come here, a part of their orientation is to do a walking tour. And I think like Minneapolis, Seattle is a place that's known for a very high Native American homeless population, unsheltered folks. And so what they want them to do is to learn about the history of homelessness in Seattle, the very long history of homelessness in Seattle, and to reduce any bias or stereotypes that they have of Native people and why they're homeless. So in this walking tour, they go and they demonstrate the treaty areas and the land that has been taken from Native people. And so the physicians who treat the patients have a better understanding and remove that pathology from homelessness and the experience of Native people. Okay, so getting into, I apologize, Indigenous culture and healing practices. The purpose of this module is to familiarize the learner with Indigenous healing beliefs and practices. The learner should be able to identify some common practices, but the goal is not for them to become a healer or practitioner of any Indigenous health practices. Instead, the purpose is to become comfortable with their patients' health practices. And if applicable, learn how to collaborate with a traditional healer and incorporate some of these components into the treatment plan. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these in the next slide and modules, but one thing that we did is to look at Indigenous health models and see how they differ from medical models. Give examples of an Indigenous health model, which you see here, which incorporates things like natural cycles of the year and natural cycles of life, and relationships between those biopsychosocial spiritual components, as well as the interconnectedness between patient, family, and tribal connection. We use this health model to create what we call the Indigi Soap Note for people to learn how to incorporate Indigenous principles of health into a medical note and into a medical treatment module. Okay, and so this module is in number 6 is very similar and it goes hand in hand with 5, which we just talked about. But this one in particular is about, trying to reach health equity for Indigenous folks. And I apologize, everyone. And what that really looks like in the patient-provider relationship. And 7's really about the entire healthcare system. So the purpose of this section is to bring attention to the role that healthcare systems play in Indigenous health equity, in particular, provide concrete examples of successful programs. So here are some examples of the tools I had mentioned. We have a tool about how to reduce bias, and that's that image that's below. We have in this particular tool, it's about learning the history, identifying common bias, and recognizing when those red flag or bias issues occur, to pause, to take note, and to make a plan, which might be working with a treatment team. But we kind of go into that tool. The other tools I've talked about a little bit already, but they include what a clinician should know and do when working with an Indigenous patient, an Indigenous soap note, Indigenous treatment plan, We even have a standardized patient evaluation form. This is standardized patients are very common in medical training and even in behavioral health training. So we've modified a tool that's been used at the John A. Burns School of Medicine at University of Hawaii, so that people can be prepared to work with a standardized patient who is a Native person and to have an evaluation form. One of the critiques that we hear a lot is from medical schools and from medical students is that, oh, content around social justice or culture or race, it's not really tested on. And so this is one of those forms that has a real concrete evaluation form. And we also have a component about provider wellness, knowing that working with traumatized patient population can be very challenging and traumatizing for providers too. So we want to make sure that providers know how to take care of themselves. Okay, so here's our last module called Indigenizing Healthcare Systems. So the purpose of this section is to bring attention to the role that healthcare systems play in Indigenous health inequity and provide concrete examples of successful programs, policies, and interactions with patients within healthcare systems so that learners can become agents for system change in their home environment. This section promotes Indigenous health beliefs and community engagement in restructuring systems of care. In the top right corner, in Hawaii, they have a medicine garden. If you go back to the bottom left, next to that medicine garden, they have a place for people to practice Native Hawaiian spirituality. There's an altar there. So you don't often see in healthcare systems a place that is safe for Native people to practice their spirituality. Just a couple months ago here in Oklahoma, a gentleman was doing some smudging with cedar outside of a patient room, and the security asked him to leave, and he was outside. So this is an example of providing what patients and their family members need, and it's important for it to become a structural or a policy change. In the top left, that's the NUCA System of Care South Central Foundation. They actually have traditional healing as part of their primary care clinic. And the bottom right is an example of providing traditional Indigenous foods in a healthcare setting in a hospital. Okay, so again, miigwech, wado, thank you all for coming today. I do have a list of publications around some of this content, but I will go ahead and stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis, for that wonderful presentation, part 2 to the Indigenous Health Toolkit. We definitely have learned a lot. Even though I've heard this a lot, I always learn something new each time. Would like to open it up to any questions that people may have.
Would we be able to get a copy of the slides with the references?
Sure, I'm happy to share them.
How do we make that happen then?
Michelle, do
The
you?
slides will be posted within about a week to 2 weeks on the ECHO website.
Oh, okay, they will be.
So
Okay.
I'll share the website in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can always reach out to me or just Midwest Tribal ECHO in general. If you just state in the chat that you would like a copy of the slides, then I can make sure that you get a copy. I would just email it to you. And then this ECHO is kind of linked with the Hennepin Healthcare ECHO. That's why a lot of the stuff like our case presentation form and things like that is on the Hennepin Healthcare ECHO website. And so you can go to that site and follow the link to Midwest Tribal ECHO and find some of our slide decks and other information and things like that. But we're always happy to send things out to individuals.
Thank you for that. And we also do keep the recordings as well, so we can make those available. Any other questions?
I have a question. Melissa, you said you were going to initiate 3 pilot programs. Are those going to be in clinics or through universities?
So one will be a clinic and 2 will be School of Medicine.
And do you already integrate your modules in your School of Medicine, or is there a requirement? Or can you explain that a little bit more about how that works in your school?
Yeah, I'll do a real brief history because it won't make a lot of sense if I just talk about Missouri alone. So when I was at University of Minnesota Medical School, Duluth, actually, Dr. Myra and I had been working for several years on providing training for mental health professionals. And so we started with mental health professionals. And then when I was at Duluth, we did a community-based participatory research project to add 7 hours of curriculum to first year medical students there, given the rural and American Indian mission. And so that was the first place that we began training medical professionals. And then I received some grants to do some work with my home tribe here in Cherokee Nation. So I moved universities to University of Missouri. University of Missouri looks very different than Minnesota. All of the federally recognized tribes have been removed. So we don't have a lot of Native patients, and we don't have a lot of Native medical students. Then we moved on, our group moved on to kind of think about broadly, if we could create a toolkit that could be applicable to folks in a variety of different health settings and across a variety of different, Indigenous communities. And that's where we kind of got the idea to do the toolkit. So when I first got to Missouri, we started creating the toolkit so it could be applicable to more people. In Missouri right now, there are 2 sites that are interested in starting the toolkit. Right now in Columbia, Missouri, we don't have any content on Indigenous health at our School of Medicine, but we are working on it. Sorry for the long explanation. It just wouldn't have made sense without the backstory.
Well, I have to add that I really appreciate that. And I am an assistant professor at a nurse practitioner program in Duluth, and I'm from Duluth. So I appreciate your work. And a couple of my colleagues are also on this meeting. And I just want to tell you how exciting your work is to us. And if we could explore, like some of the other participants are explaining, is there a way to contact you at some point about expanding the toolkit and some
Yeah.
ideas to other programs?
Yeah, I think the best way is just to contact me. We received our second grant to do this pilot test, and I'll try to be brief. I was kind of under the impression that I just wanted to kind of keep it open access to everyone. And then I had been working with some colleagues in New Zealand, and their medical school has the most Indigenous health content, over 1,000 hours in their School of Medicine than anywhere else in the world. And they really advised me just to be a little bit more cautious, because you don't want people to take a piece of it here, a piece of it there, and for it to not go well, and for it to not really be really well coordinated with local Indigenous communities. So then I took a step back and sort of said, okay, I'm happy to work with anyone. I kind of have that spirit of sharing, but I understand what they're saying, that it really should be purposeful. And I don't want my name or any of our, group's name associated with something that might not be, a work that's not really well done. So at this point, it's just really new. So I appreciate you giving us any feedback, and I'm open to working with anyone, but that we just might create a plan together about implementing it, and just being patient, knowing that it's new and I'm learning the best way to share it with everyone. But the most important thing, you know, to me is that Indigenous people receive equitable care. And if there's any way that I can share materials to do that, I will do that. And I will say the Native students at Duluth, the medical students, are the ones that really pushed this, and at the other universities as well. So really, I wouldn't be doing this without the community members, and really Native people in Minnesota teaching me, and the Native students in Minnesota, and now a variety of other schools teaching me. So I'm just doing my best to listen to everyone. I'm happy to collaborate with any of you. So in the slides, you can see my email, and just shoot an email, and I'm happy to chat more.
Great questions. Are there any final questions? We have about 10 minutes. Michelle, do you think we have enough time for our consult?
Potentially. I think if people have more questions, we can certainly focus on those. Oh, it looks like Dr. Lewis just posted her email address in the chat. You're all welcome to jot that down.
Any
Does anybody? Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and pull up that case consult.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you all. Y'all take care.
Miigwech. Giga Wabaman.
Kigo Wabaman.
All right, bear with me. This is always so hard. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so the client I wanted to chat a bit about is a 28-year-old female. Has been enrolled in an MAT program of some sort for about 4 years, and no opiate use for 3. Really doesn't have cravings for using opiates or anything like that. She did begin using alcohol around the time that she stopped using opiates. And in fact, her use of alcohol did lead to a discharge at staff request from an OTP. She is, engaged in programming with us and has indicated that her drinking is really more of an issue than she has let on. She's drinking just about daily, and thinks that she needs more support, and has kind of vocalized that to us, but doesn't follow through with any of the referrals. And if we make appointments for her or with her, then doesn't follow through with that. So something's kind of preventing her from actually kind of taking those steps. Inpatient programming would be kind of difficult for her because she does have 2 children in her care. She'll go days, even weeks sometimes, without Suboxone, and she'll say she's not having withdrawal symptoms, not having cravings, even if it's been 2 weeks without any Suboxone. But she's really fixated on it helping her and saying that she needs it. She's really reluctant to try other meds. And obviously we have concerns about alcohol withdrawal, have really counseled her on not trying to just, stop cold turkey. But really, I'm just kind of wanting from the group, would you continue to prescribe Suboxone to her? And how would you advise or support her kind of through this process?
Does anybody have any follow-up questions that they want to ask to get more information? Can you say a little bit more, Michelle, about this client and maybe what the goal for this particular client is?
you know, I feel like with her, the goal has really changed. You know, for a while it was, you know, to just get control of the drinking, you know, because she was really saying, oh, you know, it's, you know, once or twice a week. And so now it's daily. And, you know, previously her dose of Suboxone has been, you know, she's at the max dose. And so I guess one question, I think if I kind of, we have to kind of find and establish new goals. But one question would be, you know, what is your policy or your stance or your thoughts about prescribing Suboxone to somebody who you know is actively drinking? I know there have been concerns about that in the past that have seemed to kind of, you know, if you look at harm reduction, it's, you know, less harmful than using heroin and drinking. But just, you know, what are people doing in situations where other substance use, you know, like alcohol or benzos, pops up? Do you continue to prescribe?
I was just curious. I hear your question, Michelle. What was you? Kathy Nevin sent a question in about, did she have buprenorphine or buprenorphine in her urine?
She always has buprenorphine and norbuprenorphine in her urine. Oh, yep. So she's definitely taking it when she has it. So what's interesting is she's taking it, and she'll take 24 milligrams for a week, and then we won't see her for 2 weeks, or we won't see her for a week. And she's not able to differentiate really between opiate withdrawal and alcohol withdrawal. And so she'll come in and she's just like, I don't feel good, I need my Suboxone. But it's like, well, you haven't had Suboxone for 2 weeks, you know, is that really what's making you feel sick? And I think one of the things that tends to happen is then really stretching it out. So if, you know, she's engaged in the program where she comes in and doses in the clinic with us, and so what'll happen then is you get, you know, take home doses, and you can really stretch those out, you know, so you can turn a 2-day supply into a 4-day supply or something like that if you're not taking the right dose. So we're not really sure what's going on with those.
There's another question that came in from Jeremiah. He's asking, what barriers can she identify that prevent her from engaging in more care?
One of the things she identifies is just mental health symptoms, just being depressed and just not really wanting to do anything. So one of the things that tends to happen is she stops all of her meds. So stops taking thyroid hormone replacement, stops taking antidepressants. And then, you know, she's able to identify that when she's taking those things, she feels so much better, has more motivation, and is able to get up and moving and all of those things, but then goes back to not taking them, and then kind of starts that whole cycle again of just not being able to get up and get moving. And that prevents her then from being able to make her appointments and take her meds and things like that. And this, it's a really good question. And what's interesting is it's kind of been this same pattern for years, and we're just kind of not making any progress.
I do think though that it does seem like more progress as far as her being open about her use. I don't know if she's made any plans about that, or if she's asking for any advice or support with that, her drinking specifically, but I think that's a big step.
I think that's a really good point, and maybe something that I just kind of haven't really thought about. I mean, yeah, that's progress. Yeah, absolutely. Shelley, no, she really kind of isolates. She doesn't. So Shelley had asked, does she identify with anyone in her community that could offer her support? No, she's done a really good job of kind of appearing to be doing really well. And so my understanding is that she is just now starting to admit and kind of talk about how much she's drinking. And Kathy, in response to your comment, she says that she wants to. And I believe that she does, and I believe that it's interfering in things. I'm just not sure how much. And Simone asked about peer supports. I think that might be a really good first step. Because we're kind of like going from 0 to inpatient treatment, where maybe we should start smaller. Those incremental changes and things. So.
And Kathy
Thank you
asked a question about whether or not she wants to quit drinking. Like, did she express that when she shared her drinking?
Yeah. Yes, she has said that she wants to. She wants to. And one thing that was, I think really, kind of going back to what you said, Dr. Myra, it was really helpful. One of the things she said is, I started drinking when I was in treatment for opiates, and I didn't think it, it didn't really count, right? Opiates were the problem. Alcohol wasn't the problem. And so she was able to kind of justify her drinking by, I don't have a problem with that. And is now kind of changing her tune about that a bit. So I think you're right. There has been some progress, and I don't know, Kathy, how much she wants to stop, because her behavior isn't actually really matching what she's saying.
Sure. So I'm going to step back to the first question that you had is, should I continue prescribing Suboxone? And by golly, yes, you should continue prescribing Suboxone. And, but maybe you need to look at how, maybe you need to make changes in how you do it. So you mentioned that she has 2 kids. Does she have custody of the kids?
She does. They are both in her care.
So is that a motivating factor for her to leverage that a little bit, and one of the things I do a lot when I'm meeting with patients is talking to them about those kids and about the role model that they are for those kids. And just really, it's not rocket science. It's nothing that they don't know, but it makes an impact. And I don't know, if they, even things like putting pictures of your kids inside the cupboard door where you keep the alcohol, or little things that can try to say, hey, who's this about? Is it about you? Is it about keeping your kids? Just like others have said, what are her goals? But she's
really good
in opioids, so hallelujah.
I know, it's so great. It's so great.
Definite win.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that, everybody. That's been, it's helpful. And then yeah, Shelley, with the she's done so well on Suboxone, and I think that she just is like that's what's done it for her, right? And it's like, well, you've done a lot of the work, sure Suboxone was helpful, but maybe kind of reframing the way we're talking about some of these other medications and things, and maybe using them in the same way that Suboxone was helpful for opiates. And this is kind of, you all bring up some really, really good points, and right, we have to change what we're doing, because what we're doing and the approach that we're taking is not, it's not being very helpful right now. So.
And I just add to, really great points in the chat here about supporting her around more dialogue around what her goals are and what her, where she'd like to be with her drinking. It sounds like maybe it did start from a place of wanting to get on a better path. However, it's become really problematic for her. She's recognizing that. And it sounds like she wants to quit, but what maybe are those barriers, and why, how did that maybe replace, or how is that leading to maybe some avoidance of what some of the underlying issues are? And I do see that we're about time, but Brian did post another question in the chat. How much alcohol is she drinking on a daily basis?
A bottle.
Okay, and he's saying that she may need daily or multiple times per week dosing.
Yeah, no, she's dosing daily. And the program that she came from was very strict about, you cannot mix Suboxone and alcohol. You absolutely cannot. And so she was very trained to, if she was going to drink or had drank, to not take her Suboxone. And it's been really hard to change that kind of mindset. And so she's kind of afraid to come into the clinic if she drank the night before, because she thinks that she's going to get in trouble and we're not going to dose her, and it's going to be this big, kind of to do. One of the things that I think is kind of a barrier for her is the amount that she's drinking, which it's like what's the small bottle, a pint or more for every day or every other day, is concerns about, like, she needs to go to detox or to the hospital. And then she's like, well, she doesn't want to take the time. And then plus, you factor in the kids, and how do I just, pause life so that I can go to detox? So that creates another barrier. Yes, she drinks less when she's on buprenorphine.
Well, great. We are about 7 minutes after. Thank you all.
Sorry, guys.
For joining us today. Great conversation, and we really look forward to continuing our conversation next time. At our next meeting will be on the 3rd, and I believe Lisa Shefty will be joining us to talk on, do you recall offhand, Michelle, what she was talking about?
Yeah, it's the intercultural development inventory, which I believe is something you can it's like a test or a survey you can do on yourself. So yes. I'm pretty excited about that.
Great. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.